I'm Sydney Owen. I'm a research data analyst with the Brenden-Colson Center for Pancreatic Care at Oregon Health and Sciences University. So just some background. So here at OHSU, we have actually been using the LabKey server side for quite a long time to manage the blood and tissue samples for the Oregon Pancreatic Tissue Registry, the OPTR. And so we have a lot of familiarity with LabKey going back for a while now. And we use it to manage all of the study participants' clinical and research data, as well as the sample inventory associated with those samples. And then within Brenden-Colson, we also have another group which conducts research into patient-derived models of cancer, or PDMCs for short. And like you had been mentioning earlier, with a lot of labs still managing in Excel, that was our case as well. The freezer inventory, all sample data, and all of the results of testing and assay data was all being stored in separate Excel spreadsheets rather than in one unified database system. And as I'm sure everybody on this call knows, this can lead to issues, lots of issues, like duplicated data entries required across different spreadsheets to capture all of the metadata. Sometimes data would be entered on one sheet, but not another if you're busy in the lab. And you also don't have those data integrity checks or the audit abilities that Sample Manager or other database system could provide. So you can't see who checked out a sample when. We wanted to be able to do that, to be able to help investigate back on samples, what had happened over the samples timeline. And also the inability to easily track that parent-child relationship among samples has been a huge need for us, being able to track that line of descent from a parent sample and then all of the derivatives below it. So to address some of these issues, we started looking into Sample Manager when it started first getting introduced in conferences like this in the past. Some of the things that really appealed to us was that easy freezer inventory that's highly customizable to the lab, as well as the check-in and check-out functionality, audit logs, and then the ability to track any changes that happen to the database, and also customize the fields for both assays and the sample data. So I got asked I presented this as maybe a solution for the lab, and my boss said, yeah, make it work, adopt the spreadsheets that we've been using so far, that the lab has been using, build it out, test it out, get it finished, present it to them, and if it works, you'll get buy-in. And so that's what I set out to do. So this is an example of our landing page. So you can see here just a highlight in the center of the samples that we have in our freezer inventory and sample inventory there. And then here's our drop-down menu where you can see the different types of samples under those sample types, as well as the assays and different storage locations. So this is exactly what our storage locations we have in our lab are and all of the samples that we have. So we fully customize this to what the lab needs and what they're managing. And also as new things come in, it's easily customizable to add a new sample type or to add a new storage location so that we can quickly kind of on the fly adapt to our needs, which is really, really good. So one of the other things that, so building out each of those different sample types, this is a view of that sample type page itself. Something that we liked with the sample ID, which is that required field, is that we were able to customize it to incorporate the IDs that we've already been using in-house so that we didn't have to change to an entirely different system, and so that it was human readable for members of our lab. Something else I want to highlight is that we have made in the blue text in the lower right of the sample data example there, those are lookup list controlled fields. So we wanted to make this as easy to do data entry as possible and ensure data integrity as much as possible and consistency. So building things like lookup lists for data entry so that's easier for the lab, it's quicker. And then for someone like me, who's a data person, making sure that there's less room for mistakes and that it's going to be more consistent. This is an example of the freezer storage box view, which you can see, this is a pretty full box on the left-hand side. Something that we have really liked about this is that you can color code the box with different sample types, so you have a quick visual of what's in the box. But you can also flip through the different boxes and see visually where you have space in the freezer, because managing space is another one of the big concerns that we have. We're always looking for more freezer storage space. There's always never enough space. So being able to quickly know, okay, here in this box, in this rack, we have space to put in samples that were just created is a really useful tool as well. So currently we're extensively using the sample type, freezer management, and jobs functionality. And we are looking towards using jobs more in the future. This is an example of assay tracking that we do. So one of the things we really like this about too is once you enter the sample data into the sample type, it pulls in that parent metadata so that you don't have to re-enter anything. And it's a good, easy way to track all the results. And it's all centralized here so that you have the assay data along with your sample data in one central database. And then here's the example of the jobs and workflows I want to show you. Apologies. So this is an example of a workflow that you see on the right under the current task, that green box in the right center. So this allows us to track a given workflow over time or within the lab. So you can do it as a checklist of tasks, but also track over time how those workflows and what you're working on has changed in the lab. So it's a good record going forward. We're also in testing right now to link back to the data, the OPTR sample data. It's on the LabKey server side, linking it via ETL back to the sample manager side, so that when someone from the lab uses a sample that's managed by the OPTR repository, they can take that sample data, use it within the sample manager side, and not have to re-enter any of that data. So some ongoing and development work that we've been doing. We always work closely with Hannah. She's amazing. And any questions that they arise. One of the workaround things we've had to do in the past has been the issue of when you have a box and you check out a sample and then you want to put a new sample in that spot. So you create a new one and put it in there. That checked out sample that had previously occupied that position needs to be moved completely out of that box. So our solution to that was a bag of samples for ones that have been removed from storage and aren't going back into storage. But it's a little bit of a workaround. And then we've also done work in the past to develop on the server side a wide report view for all of the assay data on the sample manager side. So that it's easy to view across sample types all in one spot. So, but it has to be linked out from the sample manager side. So that is, sorry for the technical issues, but that is an overview of what we're doing here at the Brenden-Colson Center. And I can go back through any of these slides you have any questions about in more detail, and now that I have this updated version with me.
That was great, Sydney. Thank you so much. I actually have a question for you. So you mentioned kind of at the beginning the lab's need for moving into a tool like this. Was there a particular breaking point that you can recall, or was it like a lot of little things that was like, we finally have to do this?
I think I was at a breaking point because you're at a point where you have to do more work keeping track of disparate things as far from a data perspective, and do a lot more data cleaning and stuff like that if you want to do any analysis. And we were also at a point where we were in a transition point, and we were maybe gonna be doing a full inventory of our whole system. So it seemed like a good time to develop this out, integrate the full inventory of what we had, and just have a good starting point to go forward from there. Something that would be professional and have those data integrity checks and other things going forward, so that just set up for success for the future. But I think it was mostly like we saw it, and then we saw the opportunity, and then had a little bit of a period of transition and took the opportunity.
Awesome. It's great to hear. So a couple of questions here in the chat. In one of the slides, I think you had presented kind of the overview of the different sample types that you had. What was sort of the reasoning to break up different tissue samples, I think is kind of what the question is referring to within the system, and what advantage has that given you?
So the reason for bringing up into the different sample types that we have, the different tissue sample types. I will say that I am not an expert on why the lab breaks up into these different categories. So I am not the person who's in the lab, but I took the data and the sample types that they work with and the ones that they're the distinctions that are important to them. And this is how they have chosen to build out their inventory, and which you can see the different ones we have here. So these different types of samples that you have here, they have different types of assays run on them. They have different types of treatments. They're usually that's the distinction, is like there's different things done to these types of samples. They're processed differently, and that's where the distinction comes from.
Awesome. So kind of maybe organizational as well as utility, you're able to customize those fields for each of those, kind of depending on what's relevant to your lab.
Yes, yes. And then those data entry fields are all customized and have the drop-down menus and things as well, so that it's easy to quickly know what you're working with, and you don't have to track down those extra details about a given sample from notes or something like that.
Awesome. And then another question here, how did your lab respond to this once you kind of migrated over to Sample Manager?
Yeah, so initially they wanted to keep using both the Excel and this at the same time, test it out, test the waters, because there were concerns that there would be issues, right? But I tried to make, and so we did training sessions with the lab at first. So I built it, got the data in it, got their data in it, and then presented it, and then did training on it. And I think we got buy-in because we made it as easy as possible. We made it intuitive. We did those training sessions, and we worked together to make any changes that came out. We're like, let us know if this is working or not. And if it's not, we'll change it. That's the whole point. The whole point is to make this easier for you from the data entry side, and then also for us on the data analyst side as well. So it took time, I think, for people to get used to a new system. Transitions to new systems are never painless, but we have gotten buy-in. We're no longer tracking in both places. So
huge step forward. That's exciting. Okay, I think that kind of wraps up the question. Sydney, thank you so much. That was a great presentation.
Yeah, thank you.